as well as those who will be watching us in the future. And so be it. So, dear friends, we would like to welcome our dear friend Yuri Castro um, for this amazing Saturday afternoon into this evening, in which he will be speaking about speech and silence. Yuri Castro is a Spiritist volunteer committed to dissemination and the practice of the Spiritist teachings. He is part of the Conscious Living Spiritist group from North Miami, Florida. And whenever he is involved in the doctrine, Yuri is seeing patients as a clinical psychologist. He is married and has two amazing sons. And today we welcome our dear friend Yuri Castro to speak about his speech and silence. Thank you and welcome, Yuri. Thanks for your time and thanks for your family as well for allowing you to be here with us in this precious time, the precious afternoon. Thank you. Go ahead.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here. You may hear some kids in the background, hopefully not. But it's a pleasure to be here. It's a pleasure to be able to, it's an honor to be able to come here and talk about Spiritism. And today's talk is called Speech in Silence. Are we able to see my slides? Yes, there we go. So, the idea of today's lecture is to give us something very practical for us to use and to understand the power of our words and how much attention do we pay to those words, how much attention do we pay to what we're speaking, how we're speaking, and when are we using silence and why. I have to say in the general way, why is silence so hard to achieve and what are its benefits. So the idea is basically when to stay silent and when to speak up. We're gonna be talking about speech first and foremost, about our words. I like in my lectures to bring a multitude of sources from Spiritism. I always like to leave the source material for that slide on the top right corner, so you have the cover there. This one in particular comes from Between Heaven and Earth, psychographed by Chico. Through André Luis, by André Luis, psychographed by Chico, and he says that speech. So this takes place when Clarencio, one of the characters, takes André Luis to meet Clara, who is a woman who holds these like talks for other women in the spirit world. And Clara is talking about speech, the importance of our word. And she says, speech, whatever it may be, invariably entails specific electrical energies, liberating rays of a dynamic nature. The mind, she goes on to say, is the incessant generator of power through the positive and negative wires of the sentiment and the thought, thereby producing speech, which is an electromagnetic discharge regulated by the voice. So Clara here is explaining the importance of the voice in the service of speech. And she's talking even about the mind being this incessant generator of power, through which the sentiments and the thoughts and everything are going to combine to produce the speech through the voice, regulated by the voice. She continues to say that that is why in all our areas of activity, the voice modulates speech. This requires the purification of the inner life because speech, after the mental impulse, lies at the base of creation. Thanks to speech, people approach and adjust themselves to the work they're responsible for. And by means of the voice, such work may be aided or retarded in space and time. So the idea here, she's saying that the voice modulating speech and this purification of the inner life, because our speech is going to represent what is going on in here and in here, in the mind and in the heart. And she's saying it lies at the base of creation because our words can create, modulate, mediate, destroy. Our words, as a manipulation of the fluid, they have a lot of power, just like our thoughts have a lot of power. And she's saying that people approach and adjust themselves to the work they are responsible for through the speech, and by means of the voice, such work may be aided or retarded in space and time. So basically, we can either use speech for good or we may use speech for evil. And the idea here is she's saying that retarded about our work, our evolution, and it is very hard to hold our tongues because our minds can think very, very quickly. Our minds are very, very fast. And sometimes it's hard to do this filter where it goes through the mind. It goes in the mind. We have this creation of the thought, and then the thought becomes a speech. On the book, unfortunately, we don't have this book in English yet. Harvest of Light by Chico Xavier, and Psychograph by Chico by Emmanuel. He's talking on the message number 97, the verb as creator. He says, what comes out of the heart and mind through the mouth is a living, throbbing force involving the creature for good or evil, depending on the nature of the emission. The psychic elements that we externalize through our mouths are powers acting on our behalf, active factors that act under our responsibility, basically. So Emmanuel is basically saying that we are responsible for the words that we create, for the feelings and the thoughts that are externalized through words, this internal life, this inner life, I guess, that we externalize through the use of the word. So yes, we are very much responsible by these psychic elements that we externalize, that we put out there. In the book, the problem of life and destiny, which is, I have to say, one of my favorite books. It's by Leon Denis. He talks about language. So he says the soul in its deep intuitions may have the sensation of the infinite things in which it participates, into which it aspires. So the intuition, the soul may have that intuition, that inclination, that idea. But he's going to say it would seek in vain to express them with the rudiments of our feeble human language. In vain would it strive to translate eternal things into the poor language of earth. Look how powerful this passage is. He's saying that we have this intuition, we have this idea, this notion that we can't quite put into words. It is very much true. And he goes on to say the word would be impotent, yet our evolved consciousness is capable of perceiving the subtle radiations of higher life. And we can think of the subtle radiation, or this in plural, right? It's radiations of higher life. And we can think of, for instance, elevated sentiments, elevated feelings such as love. How can we explain love? If we had somebody that had never seen love, let's say somebody from another planet comes here and we're trying to explain what love is, or even try to explain love to a 4-year-old, any word that we use, any sentence that we may use is going to come out short, because it's going to come up short only because we feel it in our hearts. We truly feel it in our essence, but our language is still feeble because we are still evolving, and there's so much more that we cannot yet translate or put into words. And in the Spirit's book, there's a lot of references in the Gospel according to Spiritism as well about this limitation that we have because of our vocabulary and because of the way we express ourselves, which is okay. We're still evolving. We're still understanding more and more every time we go through these reincarnations, and we're progressing as humanity. There's another book called the Book of Hope too. This is also not translated. This is by Psychograph by Chico by Emmanuel, and also a Book of Messages. And then this one is this chapter 24, our verb. Emmanuel is going to say words are agents in the construction of all the buildings of life. The verb is the light of life, which Jesus himself used to bequeath to us the renewing gospel. So bequeath means to give or to leave by, or to hand out. So to giving us this gospel, or leaving this gospel behind. So he's saying that words are these agents in the constructions of all the buildings of life. Emmanuel is saying. He goes on to say, in everyday work, be it as natural as a simple bread on the table, so our word or speech. In the effective exchanges, let us use it as pure water. In serious moments, let us do it like the surgeon's scalpel, which prudently limits itself to the incision in the diseased area without necessary blows. On sad days, let us consider it an efficient remedy without deviating from the dosage. So Emmanuel, always very poetic, always very good with the words, talking about words and how we can use the words as agents. And I love these examples that he gives because in everyday work, he is natural, simple as the bread on the table.
Yuri,
The effective
Yuri,
exchanges.
can I hold your thought there? I would like
Yep,
to
yep.
just to take a quick second just to ask you. I don't know what's going on, but we're having an issue with the microphone. It keeps going on and in and out. And I don't think it's issued. Is there any way that like you have perhaps a
You can see the message that I just posted in the private chat.
maybe have like
No,
a,
I'm not using software, but I think is it better now?
Let me see.
Testing because the StreamYard here had echo cancellation, so I think that may be it.
yeah, that because it keeps going in and out.
Yeah.
Hopefully this will work. Let's
Daniel,
go
can
with that.
you guys hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Can we try again? You guys let me know. Just interrupt me again if we need to like adjust.
Please,
Right?
thank you.
So I don't think I'm gonna go back to the beginning, but let's maybe continue from the slide. Is that good? All right, I'll take it as a yes. So the idea again is that Emmanuel is very poetic, very good with his words and saying about how in everyday work our words be as natural as the simple bread on the table, in effective exchanges as pure as water, which has this transparency, this crystalline component to it. And this one I love. He says, as the surgeon's scalpel in serious moments, because oftentimes we're gonna have to use our words in serious conversations, in ways that we will need to address things that are not so pleasant and not so good. But he's saying it's going to be as a surgeon's scalpel, meaning exactly in the incision without necessary blows, and also on sad days as an efficient remedy without deviating from the dosage. Also, thinking here, what goes around comes around when we're talking about our words and being responsible for our words and our actions. Our actions have consequences and we are responsible for those consequences. So the law of action and reaction that we learn in Spiritists talk about so much is immutable. Those around us are attracted to us based on how we behave, and the behavior also entails how we are using our words. Because if we think about it a little bit more, whenever we're putting out these words, whenever we're making use of the tool that we have that's called speech, that we acquire through our own evolution, own spiritual evolution, how are we using that, and what are the consequences of using that speech? If we go back to question 459 of the Spiritist book, what's the influence of the invisible realm upon us and all of that, the spirits, their influence upon us is greater than we suppose. That's what they say. So when we're having these conversations, when we're having an arguments, or how are we using our words? Are we gossiping, maybe slandering, things like that? And who are we attracting that we don't even see? Because there's a lot that we don't even see that's happening around us. And these folks are going to be attracted by our actions, and our words are definitely actions that can attract them. When we go to the gospel according to Spiritism, again, talking about the overuse of speech, if we did not exceed the limit, it's going to say here, of what is necessary for the satisfaction of our needs, we would not have the sickness which are provoked as a consequence of these excesses, nor would we experience the vicissitudes which derive from them. From the what? From exceeding the limits, these limits that we have. If we put a limit on our ambitions, we would not have to fear ruin. If we did not desire to raise ourselves higher than we are able, we would not have to be afraid of falling. If we were humble, we would not suffer the deception of hurt pride. If we practiced the law of charity, we would not be slanderers, jealous, or envious, and so would avoid arguments and fights. Because how many fights, arguments are started because of the misuse of this tool that we have, the words, the speech. And nowadays, we have to be careful because it's not only the very negative conversations, it's also those that we're criticizing, I don't know, the television, or we're shouting things that we think we're by ourselves, or we're talking to our partner just in a negative form. What sort of energy is that creating around us, and what are we attracting with that, and what sort of environment are we creating with that sort of talk, with that misuse, or as the gospel says, the overuse of the speech, because a lot of that is going to cause consequences that we don't want. There's also this book Psychograph by Chico by Humberto de Campos that he talks about. There's this passage in the book, and he talks about how Jesus was observing the apostles arguing amongst themselves and like disagreeing and mentioning, one complaining about the other and criticizing the other and criticizing others and all of that. And then Jesus comes and he tells a parable to his apostles of a nation that was blessed by the good spirit. That's the word that he used, after a lot of prayers. And because of that blessing, that village or that nation had its crops grow and grow. And then the harvest was amazing. And they had all this positive result, positive result, which was a consequence of those prayers, of the right use of the speech. But then what happened was that the individuals from this nation, they saw that they have so much, the excess and all of that. So they went in arrogance and they went and started to criticize people from the neighboring village, from the neighboring nation, because they didn't have them that good of a harvest and all of that. And what happened was that those words fell into somebody's ear, and then that person talked to others, and then all of a sudden they were, you know, inflamed by that speech, by that provocation and all of that. And what happened was that the neighboring village then came and burned all the crops, and they started to fight, and it was a whole mess. And eventually Jesus says, a phrase of encouragement and kindness is a ray of light capable of lifting an entire nation, but a disturbing sentence can lead people to ruin. So he was exemplifying how, with one sentence, one provocation, and in a way, that led an entire nation to ruin. And he even goes on to say that in truth, the action comes from the arms, but the direction always comes from the thoughts through the tongue. So he's saying through the tongue, so through speech. Message number 73 is called chatter or yapping, however we want to translate it. And in this message, Emmanuel is going to tell us, let us not forget, however, the evil chatter that always forms around us an immense family of sick or degrading elements, like lethal worms that proliferate in silence and operate in the shadows. Rare people meditate on this. Isn't the unruly verb the father of slander, gossip, frivolity, and disturbance? God created the word, man created the talk. Emmanuel is going to tell us. And the unruly verb, being the father of slander, gossip, frivolity, the unruly verb, because that's how it starts. It starts as an unruly verb. It starts as something small. It starts as something that is lacks discipline, perhaps in our own use of the speech, and that eventually evolves. If alcohol intoxicates the vicious, destroying their energy, what about the misguided tongue of good that destroys vigorous sowings of happiness and wisdom, love and peace? So he's making a very strong comparison here about something biological, something that's accessible, and something that we all understand about the alcohol destroying that. He's saying, but what about the misguided tongue? The misguided tongue. Again, the overuse of speech, the lack of discipline that destroys vigorous sowings of happiness, wisdom, and love and peace. So he's once again urging us to take care of the unruly tongue. And if we go to the Bible, talking about misuse of the speech, about unruly tongues and all of that, there's a lot of references regarding slander and judgment, and I brought a few here. So in Matthew we have, for in the same way you judge others, you will be judged. And but the things that come out of a person's mouth come from the heart, and these defile them. This was what Jesus was telling them. For out of the heart come evil thoughts, murder, adultery, sexual immorality, theft, false testimony, and slander. So again, Jesus in this passage was talking because they were questioning like what they were putting inside their mouths, and that was going to defile them. And Jesus was saying it's not what goes in, it's what comes out. Basically, like the speech and the things that we're saying, because again, they're an externalization of our thoughts and our feelings. That is what defile them. He's saying comes from the mouth. Person's mouth comes from the heart. So that's what's going to defile them. And again, in James, you also have anyone who speaks ill of a brother, speaks ill of the law and judges the law. And if you judge the law, you're no longer a follower of the law, but a judge. And we're not judges. We can't judge the law. And so by consequence, we can't judge others. And we often judge them through the speech. When we point the finger and we mention something about that person, did you hear that this happened and all of that? We have this unruly and undisciplined tongue. And the idea here is we're not the judges. We can't judge because, number one, we also don't know the other people's challenges and trials. We don't know what they're going through, first and foremost. So for us to be more mindful of how we're using our tongue, how we are using the speech and this tool that we acquire through such a long path of evolution. And in terms of slander and gossiping, I have a parable here that's I wanted to bring to you guys. It's a small story with a moral teaching, obviously. And this one goes like kind of like this. There was this village, and in this village there was this woman who liked to gossip a lot. And she heard about this sage, this like very wise woman that was considered the sage, that lived in a nearby village, and that everybody who went to talk to this older woman, this wise woman, they became better. They improved themselves. So one day, this young woman, she decided, you know what, I'm gonna talk to her. I want to see if there's anything I can do to just be better and not gossip so much, not be a slanderer and all of that. She was trying to improve. So she went to this sage, this old woman, and she's talking to her, and she's like, yeah, I want to become a better human being. I want to like talk less about others, and I often find myself speaking ill of a brother or a sister. And I want to improve on that. What do you recommend I do? And the wise woman, she looked at her and she's like, okay, I can help you with that, I think. But I'm gonna ask you to do something for me. I'm gonna ask you to do a quick task first and foremost, or I guess not quick, but a small task. Okay, I would like you to go and get I don't know, like a sack, a burlap sack, whatever, and then I want you to collect feathers from different birds. So you can whatever birds you may find, just go out there, collect a lot of feathers, fill this burlap sack with feathers, and come to me. So the woman went and collected a lot of feathers and filled the burlap sack, came back to the sage and said, okay, here's the sack with a lot of feathers. What should I do now? And the sage, okay, now is the second part. Okay, now I want you to go to the mountain. You see the mountain near our villages there, the peak of the mountain. I want you to go to that mountain. And once you reach that mountain, take that sack with you with the feathers. And when you're up there, I want you to just empty the sack of feathers there. Okay, the young woman didn't understand, but okay, this woman's supposed to be somebody wise. I'll trust her. She went up the top of the mountain. It was very windy up there because it was very high. And then she grabbed the burlap sack. She emptied all of the sack, all of the feathers. She saw them like going in all directions, going, everywhere, and boom, they just spread. The wind carried them all. She went back to the woman without understanding so much, and the wiser woman, she's like, okay, did you do the what I asked you? Yeah, I did, but I don't get the point. I said, the woman said, okay, now to the last part, the last task. I want you to go back there and collect all the feathers again that you threw. The young woman was like, no, that's impossible. I went there, I saw feathers go all the way. Maybe I can get one or two, but they went to places I don't know, and I have no idea where they are. And then the wise woman said, in the same way are your words. Once you release them out there, you have no way of catching them back, and you have no idea where they might fall. And legend says that the younger woman did not gossip anymore. But it's something for us to think, what are we doing with our words? Do we don't know where they're gonna land, how they're gonna land. We don't know what seeds we're gonna be planting with the words that we throw to the wind, much like the feathers that the woman threw from the top of the mountain. In the book Living Spring, Chico, psychographed by Chico, and this is by Emmanuel, message number 151. Emmanuel is going to say, kindness is not always appropriate in the circle of loyal conversations. Sometimes a clarifying discussion requires serene yet decided forcefulness. Nevertheless, great care in regard to comments made afterwards is indispensable. Slander, he's going to say, lies in wait for sincerity in order to muddy its waters and neutralize its efforts. Malice does not deserve the crown of serious discussion. Giving it too much importance in conversations actually enlarges its sphere of action. So Emmanuel says that slander is a subtle poison. And he's saying here in the beginning that kindness is not always appropriate because sometimes we're going to have to have difficult conversations. We're going to have to disagree with one another. We're going to have to try to improve a situation and maybe get two people on the same page. And there's an infinite number of situations that we may need to use, words that are a little firmer, but then we have to beat like the surgeon's scalpel, as he said in a previous message. But he's also saying here, this is interesting, that slander lies in wait for sincerity in order to muddy its waters. So the idea of, sometimes we may even say something with, with sincerity, but how are we saying it? And also, are we getting carried away? Joanna De Angelis, who's a benefactor for Neil Divaldo, she says, slander is a culture of uselessness on rotten soil. To curse means to destroy. That's what she says. A culture of uselessness on rotten soil. So for us to be more mindful of how we're using our words. And then I wanted to bring something else here. This is actually what, in a way, motivated me a long time ago to create this lecture and like merge it with Spiritism, was this idea of Socrates' triple filter. And Socrates said that before we say anything, our words, our sentence, our speech must pass the triple filter test, or the three filters, however people come up with a name for that. If what we have to say passes through the filter of truthfulness, goodness, and usefulness, then we may say it, according to Socrates. So what we're about to say, is it true? Do we know if it's true? Is it good? And is it useful? If we apply this triple filter to a lot of the things that we say, I dare say we wouldn't say a lot that we have said before, or at least something for us to be mindful and cognizant going forward of this triple filter, because oftentimes it may pass through two layers. We may be criticizing someone by a work that they done or something that they said, and it's true that they need to have some criticism to improve and all of that. It may be useful, but the way we're saying it, is it good? Is it actually going to make a difference? And in the past, giving this lecture to different Spiritist center, people have suggested others. Like, is it the timing? Is it a good time? Or the other one that they suggested was, is it? Am I the one to say it? Like, am I the one who's supposed to be saying this? Which is another one that's interesting too. I think we can all add our own like interpretation and different filters to this. If we get those three alone, we already have enough, I dare say, just to start to use our verb and our word in a better way. So if we don't say, because it didn't pass through the filter, triple filter of Socrates, what do we do then? What's the other alternative, the other route? That's the second part of the lecture. Speech and silence, the silent part. So Chico Xavier, he had this great story, or this I'll say it's a technique even, about that he called the water of peace. And he said that whenever somebody irritates you and you're gonna be in a heated discussion, you're gonna lose your mind and say things you may regret, those feathers in the wind. He says, take a glass of water, drink a little of the water, but keep that water in your mouth. Don't swallow it, he says. And he says, don't throw away, don't spit, don't swallow. While the temptation to respond in that unkind way less, he says, let it bathe your tongue. And he called it the water of peace. Because if we think about how many words and how many times we got heated and we said things that we regretted, had we employed silence in a lot of those situations, we would have had a better outcome. So he's saying the water of peace exactly about that. So we're not continuing an argument back and forth that may even generate, who knows, battles, wars, and things like that. What about the vow of silence then? We're talking about how we must be careful with our words. What about if I just don't say anything at all? Well, the Spiritist book, question 772, approaches that topic. They ask the spirits, what is to be thought of the vow of silence prescribed by certain sects from the very earliest times? And then they're going to say, you should rather ask yourselves whether speech is in nature and why God has given it. That in itself is enough of an answer. But they go on to say, God condemns the abuse, but not the use of the faculties he has given. Silence, however, is useful, for in silence you have fuller possession of yourself. Your spirit is freer and can then enter into more intimate communication with us, the spirits. But a vow of silence is an absurdity. So it's not about one. If this was not in nature, no, why do we have it? God doesn't make mistakes. Why do we have speech then? Because we need this tool. We have to use this tool. But the problem here that they're saying is the abuse, again, the overuse of speech, which is along the same lines that we saw in the Gospel according to Spiritism a couple of slides ago. And they're saying silence is useful because in silence we have fuller possession of ourselves. It's not about being a mute by choice and just doing a vow of silence, because even if we do a vow of silence, what are we doing with that we were given, the tool that we were giving? How is it that we're going to live in society and communicate with others and help each other like only in silence? Is going to be more limited, to say the least, and then it goes into the law of society and the need for us to live in society and learn from one another. So the idea is not to be, okay, since my tongue is unruly, I'm going to go complete on the other end of the spectrum and I'm just going to be silent forever. It's not about that. And in the book Happy Life, psychographed by Divaldo, as we read a message earlier on today, and this is by Joanna, I have two messages here about silence. In number 23, Joanna is going to say, express your ideas calmly. If the other person disagrees, remain silent and give him or her over to time, which teaches us all unhurriedly. Time. Give that to time. Remain silent. She's saying if the other person disagrees. How many times do we have people disagree and we continue to talk and we continue to argue, or have at least done that in the past? She's saying remain silent and give him or her over to time. Express your ideas calmly, kindly. And on number 25, so you're gonna say when asked about another person, always give positive feedback. That one is interesting. If this is not possible because the person acts reprehensibly, keep silent or speak benevolently. Avoid aggravating his or her situation or making it more well known. Their shortcomings, making their shortcomings more well known. You are not an overseer of other people's behavior. You cannot know if yesterday's offender might now be in recovery. Let your opinions always be uplifting and your words helpful. Remember what we saw about Socrates, the goodness, the utility, you know, the usefulness, the goodness, truthfulness. Exactly what she's saying there. And when she's also saying, because she goes on and to say that words expressed in anger rarely convey what a person is thinking, on message number 23. That's why she's saying express your ideas calmly. And when asked about someone else, give positive feedback. Look at the bright side of them and, just speak silent or behave benevolently. So she's advocating for silence in these situations, which is great for us to sort of internalize and try to understand where can we employ silence more often in our lives. Another book by Chico, psychograph by Chico by Emmanuel. This is message number 6. This book's called The Harvest of Light. Whatever difficulty you find yourself in, refrain from carrying the burden of afflictions and unresolved questions. Penetrate the silence of your own soul. Listen to the thoughts that come from your own being, and you will recognize that the fundamental solution to all of life's problems will come from yourself. So Emmanuel is urging us once again to just be more silent, look inward, because he's saying that the difficulties, the fundamental solution to our problems, they lie within ourselves. And these answers, when we're in silence, when we are silent, we can connect very well with ourselves. We can connect with God. We can connect to the spirits around us, those spirits that are always by our side and always ready to help us. But if we keep yapping and chattering and doing all those things, we cannot listen to that. We cannot listen to that inner voice to find the solution to so many problems that we have. Moreover, we have in this book Intervals by Chico as well, and it says, in silence, which was I was saying a little bit before, of the spirit, the thoughts of heaven illuminate the thoughts of earth, and benevolent and wise voices speak to our ears through the inarticulate verb of inspiration. Having this inspiration sometimes to solve problems that we have, to solve things that may come in our lives, that we need the silence so we can connect, like I said, with ourselves, with those around us that want to help us if we only listen. Jesus always highlighted prudence and consideration, pointing out the richness of silence, which it is up to us to use in the struggles of life in favor of the success of our own tasks. So in silence, we can hear those spiritual benefactors helping us. In silence, we can find this tool of peace, this tool that we can use, such as just like speech, for goodness, for actually building something that will last, forever. Why is it so hard then? We're learning about silence. We're learning how it's so good. It can bring so many benefits to be silent in an argument, or just to be in silent in general, in meditating, praying. Why is it so hard to be silent? Because we're still evolving. We're still shaping our minds, our emotions, our spirits, our thoughts, everything. And we are in a process where we're still sometimes driven by impulse. We're driven by these lower sentiments that we carry from perhaps other incarnations and other challenges that we've had in the flesh. And sometimes it's hard because it is not sometimes hard. It is hard because sometimes people can push our buttons in ways that we feel the need to speak up. We feel the need to like have a shout back at them or just have this backlash. We are still getting there to the point where we're gonna be able to use silence fluidly and in a very good way. Joanna then on message number 49 of Happy Life, she's gonna say, many people relish in spreading bad news. Be very discreet with them. They will test your resolve with gossip. In such circumstances, silence, look at that, is the cotton that dampens the noise of the spread of growing evil. She's talking about the cotton, silence being this cotton. Look how poetic that is. Because cotton using as a dampener, but cotton is this thing that, it's like fluffy, it's white, and silence is just like that. But it dampens, the noise of the spread of growing evil, she's saying. So for us to exercise patience, for us to exercise silence, for us, to understand how our words can impact and or how our words can impact ourselves and others around us. And I want to end our meeting today with this poetry by the spirit author called Mei Mei, psychographed by Chico, and it's called "The Melody of Silence." I didn't want to um, paraphrase this one because it's a beautiful poetry. So I'm going to read word by word for you guys. She says, notice the melody of silence in the divine creations. In heaven, everything is harmony without ostentation of strength. The sun shining without noise, the world in movement without disorder, the constellations shining without dazzling us. And on earth, everything signals the music of silence, exalting God's infinite love. The seed germinating without fuss, the wounded tree preparing the fruit that feeds you without revolt, the water that hides in the heart of the fountain today to quench your thirst tomorrow. What articulated words would define their greatness? That is why the Lord also helps us through circumstances that do not speak, through time, the mute sage. Do not break the melody of silence where your phrase would sound at odds with the law of love that governs our path. Help without noise wherever you go. Remember the celestial Father's unlimited patience with our faults, and let us help without fuss our companion on his earthly pilgrimage, which many times only awaits the help of our silence in order to rise to community with God. With that, I wish everybody a blessed week. Thank you for your patience with the sound problem. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Yuri, for this beautiful message. You can the light. This beautiful message, this great reminder about speech and silence. And it's hard to, even with the reminder, with the work that you bring, the vast number of messages, for us to find the balance, right? Find the balance between the two, when to speak, when to silence. But there's so much to learn, and I think you ended in a very, very positive way, for us, through May, for us to aim to be like nature, right? And that tells us so much, that is so quiet, but do wonders, right? And it speaks loud sometimes. I was actually, last week I was near the ocean, and it was pretty loud, and it tells us, like, look, I'm here, right? So, but it's a beautiful message, and I would like to open up to, for those who may have a question. I don't know, Daniel, if we have anything on the chat that we can share. Anyone here who would like to ask a question or make a comment? I'll have passed it to Kirsten.
Hey, Yuri, that was beautiful. Actually, it's a question, but it's more of like a question. Can you share the Melody of Silence poem with us over text, email, WhatsApp, or however? I thought that was extremely beautiful. I wanted to meditate on it more. I also just wanted to say you brought a lot of great resources and books for food for thought to think about more. And in honor of this talk, I won't speak as much. So I'm going to pass it to Wendell.
Hi, Yuri. Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts about such an important topic. Mainly at a time when it seems that everybody has not the right but the obligation to give their opinion about what's happening around. My question is regarding the consequences of our speech to our physical body. When we say something that we regret about, mainly because we realize it was motivated by anger, or because we see that it hurt the other person so bad, can we say that that sensation that we have inside, like we have something stuck in our stomach, can we say it's possible that what we said, our words, cause any fluidic effect in our perispirit, reflecting in our physical body? And the second part is why, even if we try to take it back and we apologize to the other person, it's not enough to dissipate that sensation in us. Why do we keep feeling that for so long time? Thank you.
Thank you. Great question. I guess two questions, but thank you for the comments about the fluidic piece. Definitely, our thoughts manipulate the cosmic fluid on their own. So imagine our words; they do the same. So we do have this impact that oftentimes we may think that we don't notice, but we do notice, even when we're thinking a lot about something or we're sending this negative energy or these negative thoughts. They definitely have an impact. Same thing with our words, and they do impact us. They do impact those that listen to them, that heard them. And to the second piece of or second part of your question, I one time I learned about the concept of guilt, and I mean, people have different ideas or opinions, but when you're saying that sometimes even we apologize, but we still have that in us, a lot of the times I think that the guilt that we've experienced, I guess, comes from this idea that what we did, or the distance between what we did and what we knew was right. The more we have an idea of this is what I need to be doing, this is like inside, even without words, this is what I know it's right, and I do something completely opposite, the longer this distance, the stronger the guilt I'm gonna be feeling. So in a situation where we say something to a loved one that we hurt, or that hurts them, is this idea of, I know I shouldn't have said that, I did it out of impulse, and now I'm feeling terrible, even though I apologize, because there's this big disconnect, this big gap between what I did and what I know deep down that was right. So I guess it's one way to look at that.
Make sure this works.
It's on, right?
I hope so. Do I have to hold? Yeah. Good. Thank you. Thank you, Yuri, for weaving through so many Spiritist books and bringing us wonderful gems and highlights to think about. I was sitting here thinking about the cultural influences on silence, especially in Western countries. How I know people, and sometimes myself, if you're home alone, you turn the TV on just to have speaking and noise or the radio. And spending time in silence is just not always comfortable. And then also the difference, I guess, between Western and Asian cultures where children may be raised with some more meditation or teaching the rudiments of taking times to be silent. So just if you could comment, thanks.
It's a great point, the cultural piece that you talked about, because I do agree. I see, there are differences. Um, I visit Japan twice. I love the country. I like the culture a lot, and a lot of the my Japanese friends and things like that. We see how they employ silence, and I would say they overall, it's a general statement, of course, but I feel like they employ it more often than we in these westernized societies that we employ silence. So I do think I agree with you. There's a cultural component there in the way that we see the use of ourselves to society, perhaps, and like how our or the how important I am to the community around me, and like my words do have a weight in that. And the thing you mentioned too about in the beginning, like you're by ourselves, we want to have something going on in the background. We can have music, we can have something, we don't need to just stay in silence for 10 hours that we're alone in our house or whatever that may be. But the idea, just to have something good in the background, maybe some good music, or maybe spiritist talk, or something that's gonna help make the environment more serene, versus sometimes just putting something that will amount to nothing, like a useless TV show or reality show or whatever that, or I don't know, news nowadays that only broadcast disaster and politics. I don't know, things like that that will lower the vibrations of the of the place.
Yeah, Wanda was saying just turn off the news. That right. So I always believe. Well, at least one of my beliefs that when we talk about being culture, right, that it takes time to build that culture, to build that. Um, is it? Do you think that this is on your studies? Studying about these two topics, that is something that we can practice more, and by practice more, perhaps we will get a little bit closer to the Japanese culture. Since you went there twice, do you believe that this is something possible for our children and for ourselves as well, to be get closer as possible to it?
I agree, and one of the things that you said that made me think was, it's a habit. It's something that we develop through practice. There's no other way. If we may be reading 100 books, but we're not putting into practice the teachings, it doesn't matter what we're doing. But we got to remember that nature doesn't, there's no leaps in nature, right? And in evolution too, it's like a step by step, but it we have the free will to try and improve little by little every single day. And I think that cultivating, like you said, the habit for employing silence more often, or even try to use the Socrates filter next time you're going to say something in a heated debate, and remember this, is it good, is it true, is it useful? Just by doing that, and if we're able to stop ourselves from something that didn't pass through the filter, for instance, one time, we're already better than yesterday. So, and that's how I think that we build. I'm very much on building from experience, and like little by little, step by step, not trying to become archangels tomorrow just by consuming all this great knowledge that we have.
The Socrates filter that you brought, it reminded me of something that in the mundane world, right? I'm not that elevated yet, knowing everything or remembering everything about Socrates, but we usually say that there's something that you have to say that you would not say in front of your grandmother. Don't say it, right? Just keep it to yourself.
There you go.
Right? Exactly. Just keep it to yourself. But I like the Socrates. I like those three filters there. We do have a comment online that we would like to share, Daniel. Sometimes, this is from Alba. Hello, Alba. Alba says, sometimes when people grieves or is sad, we want to comfort them with kind words. But this is not always easy. Do you have any advice about it?
Excellent question. It's not easy. When somebody's grieving, it's not easy at all. And the idea of the words is using them, kindly, and as Emmanuel suggested to us, using as the remedy, but with the right dosage. That was one of the messages that I brought, you know. So the idea is, if we're gonna say something, really, really think up through what we're gonna say. Let's not exaggerate and like do a barrage of speech to the person that's grieving, and also remember silence too, and just being there with them, just being by their side in silence sometimes can be more effective than 100 words you're gonna say. So just it depends. I love that question. Depends on the case, but the main idea is, if we're gonna use the words, let's be mindful and kind with them, with those the words, but also remember to employ the second piece of the today's no talk, silence, and just being present with them in silence so they know that you're there is already a big step.
Thank you, Yuri. Daniel, anyone else? A good image when talking with kids about the effect of our word is using a dental paste tube. Once the paste is out, there is no way to put it back, no matter how much we want. Yeah, that is true. Never thought about that. That is great. Yes. On that note, Yuri, I would like to also ask, this goes with the previous question that Alba had. When we speak, when we are solicited is one thing, right? And when we speak, that when unsolicited, right? When people don't ask us to speak in a situation, just as Alba mentioned, right? When do we do more harm? When we are, or if there is anything, because sometimes we just want help, right? Because sometimes we speak out of nowhere. The person is suffering, but then they didn't ask for anything. They just asked for us to be there, right? So is there such a thing as more harm than on one than the other?
First and foremost, I love the toothpaste analogy. Yes, that's great because it's very visual, and you can do that with the kids. It's, you know, akin to the feathers parable that I mentioned, and I just want to make a parenthesis that I thought and I forgot to mention. I don't know if I think it was Wendell who mentioned something about culture, and but the thing is, we no wasn't him, sorry, but the thing is, we nowadays, the thing with the feathers, think about social media, think about the instrument that we have today with the internet, where one sentence we say is not just heard by the people around us, discarnated or incarnated, but it can go and travel the entire world in seconds, and everybody can see. So like the responsibility of our speech is more evident than ever with the internet. um, so just something for us to think. The second piece, you know, that you're saying about the grieving person. Sometimes I do think that sometimes misplaced words can do more harm than good, like than silence. And a lot of the times we speak out of turn, or we speak when we're not solicited to speak. So the best thing is to approach the situations like that with like calmness and just kindness, and just trying to see what the person needs, and letting them tell you as well, because oftentimes we may just come in full of good intentions to try and help them, but all they want is to be in silence. All they want is to be left alone just for a little bit, or they want to process in their own way. uh, Also, that I want to just make a little asterisk here in my speech and say that therapy can help a lot with that. I know I'm biased because I'm a clinical psychologist, but therapy can sometimes be the option. So if you're feeling like I don't have any tools to deal with this or to help this person, sorry, um, I tried silence, I tried speech, I tried everything I can. Sometimes they may need no additional help from a professional. So that's something that I want to just like leave there as well, because that's also um, a route that you can take to help that person.
And it's interesting that you mentioned about, you know, the parable, and then Alba also, and you brought social media to the discussion. I don't know if you have noticed, or if anyone have noticed that many ads or many promoters nowadays, instead of saying of what they were trying to accomplish, they're actually coming with the message in a denial mode, if I can say it that way, that to say, I dare you to look at this, or don't look at this. And then we're, as human beings, we want to know, why is this person saying don't look at this, right? And we're inquisitive, we want to know, right? And then we'll find out that, okay, really, what was this thing, right, that we went in there? But they're using this technique to get people's attention, right? And there we are, we fall for it. And it's the same thing as, sometimes we fall for, the unfortunate words or phrases or speech that is out there. So just, that came to mind, that we have to arm ourselves, or guard ourselves from it, just to protect ourselves. Well, it was a great reminder, a lot of food for thought, a lot of information, as we have mentioned, and we thank you for putting this together. Iracema saying thank you so much, Mr. Yuri, for this great presentation, and bringing to us this reminder when, for us to lead our life that is a little less confusing, right? Since you brought the Japanese culture there, it always brings me to wonders, when we hear the culture that, outside you don't speak, in the train you don't speak, you just stay quiet, you don't hear any noise, and it's just an amazing thing that perhaps one day we'll get there, that we'll allow ourselves to, or we guide ourselves in that way. So we thank you for that reminder. Would like to ask you to stay here for us to pray together, and obviously connect in the future so that we can further this discussion, or perhaps something new as well. On that note, we would like to invite everyone to give thanks for our dear Creator and exercise our speech in an elevated way. Dear Master Jesus, guide our minds, our hearts, to be an example as our dear friend Yuri, who used his speech, this beautiful capability, to remind us of this topic, of speak, of silence, but most importantly, to guide others into perfection, to remind each one of us of the resources that we have, of higher minds who have conquered quite a bit with these two topics, giving us reminders, ways that we can live a more fulfilling life, to speak whenever possible, whenever needed, with prudence and with love, to quiet ourselves whenever needed, whenever the heart can speak louder, with a hug, with a smile, guiding one another to live a more fulfilling life. We take you, dear Master Jesus, into our hearts, always connecting the minds and hearts of those around us, as you did to those who walked with you, as you continue to do with us, dissipating dissension and all the other feelings that are adverse to the natural laws that we study with this Spiritism. May your blessings shower upon us, upon our dear friend Yuri and his family. And we give thanks for the opportunity that we had to work and to guide ourselves together. And so be it.